This box just turned up at the door from a brand called Tukus that I hadn't heard of before. So a couple of weeks ago, this brand, Tukus, got in touch asking if I wanted to review a set of their carbon wheels, specifically their flagship Bluefin Aero series. So I did what I always do and jumped on their website to have a look at the specs and see if they're actually anything interesting. And these things look absolutely wild. I have never seen a set of wheels that look as bling as this before. In fact, these even make Princeton's look boring. So yes, these wheels are incredibly bling and look extremely high end, but is it just for aesthetics or do they perform as good as they look? I have to say, first impressions, the packaging seems pretty solid on these. They use quite a wide wheel box, which means when you take a look inside, both the wheels are fully lined up in there, rather than sort of slotting them in next to each other. I think this generally does provide really good protection for the wheels, and they use a really nice piece of foam on the top to hold them in place. Taking the wheels out then, yeah, I told you they were bling. This is the front wheel, looking rather smart there in all its gold glory. And here is your rear wheel. Again, just as bling as the front. And then we get a little accessories box, which, to be honest with you, I don't think there's very much in here. A manual and some valve extenders with what I think might be some spare nipples, and unfortunately, nothing else in the box. So no spare spokes, and the lack of spare spokes will probably become significant when we take a look at how crazy the spokes on these things are. So, despite it being really well protected, and I don't think you'll have any issues with damage and shipping, let's get the packaging aside and take a look at what we're really interested in, the wheels themselves. So yeah, these are what Tukus call their Bluefin wheels, which are a variable rim depth. And to be precise, these are the Turbo SR, and the rim depth varies from 62 at the deepest to 55 at the shallowest, with this weird sort of shark fin kind of pattern. And you might be already noticing the other key feature of these wheels, and that is that they use these weird wavy spokes, which in theory, according to Tukus, are supposed to be super aerodynamic. However, they don't seem to publish any wind tunnel data, and I'm not rich enough to be able to take these down to Silverstone to test them myself, so I have no idea whether this is just for show or if this makes a big difference. The only other brand I've seen do anything like this is Scribe, who on their latest aero wheels that did test really well have used a similar kind of wavy spoke. Taking a look at the hubs, they are a sort of silver finish hub, and I am a bit of a sucker for a silver hub. I might prefer a gunmetal finish, but yeah, silver's always nice. And I've gone for an HD3 hub, but of course you can get these in XDR as well. They come with a pre-installed 10-speed spacer. I won't be needing that. And it is a nicely machined out free hub body with what is technically a replaceable anti-bite guard. Now, one thing that has concerned me though, is you'll be able to see where the spokes interface with the hub is a non-captive design. And the reason why this is a cause for concern is if you were to snap a spoke and your wheel were to lose tension, then in theory, all the other spokes could fall out. And the chance of a completely catastrophic wheel failure might be more likely. Now, this is a really rare event and I've never had it be a problem, but it is something to be aware of, especially if you're a heavier rider. On the free hub, it does say ceramic, and underneath the end caps, in theory, we should find some ceramic bearings. And yes, well done Tukus, they have greased under the end caps. For us Brits that have to deal with horrible weather, that is a brilliant sign and means you're not going to be running bone dry bearings that are really vulnerable to all the grime on our roads. The classic, obnoxiously loud free hub, love to see it. And taking a look at the rim bed, I'm going to get my caliper out and let's see what it measures up at. Interestingly, on their spec sheet, they do say these rims are 23 internal, but getting on my calipers, I'm getting 24 millimeters internal, which of any spec to not be as advertised, I'm not going to whinge that the rims are wider than they claim. Externally is a bit harder to measure, but the widest point they're measuring up at around 31 millimeters. So these rims are probably optimal for if you like to run a 28 or a 30mm tyre. Getting the front wheel out, it is more of the same blingy goodness with the same silver hubs and ceramic bearings again. And for a deep set of wheels, they do feel pretty light. Not the lightest things I've ever picked up, but yeah, considering they're a deep wheel with wide spokes, they should be pretty light on the scales. On the topic of the spokes, as well as this crazy wavy profile, they also are really quite wide as spokes go. Obviously, this is more common with carbon spokes and in theory should be quite aero. My only concern with this is very wide spokes. Obviously, when you've got a crosswind blowing side on at your wheels, they can lead to a bit of instability. So I'm really curious to see how these hold up in crosswinds. And taking a look at the end of the spoke, you can see the nipples are very well hidden in the rim. So they're not a fully hidden nipple, but these definitely shouldn't contribute too much to the drag of these wheels. And these wheels spin incredibly smooth, as you would expect with brand new ceramic bearings. Now, I definitely don't want this video to descend into a ceramic bearing debate. I know some people love them, some people hate them. The jury's out whether they're actually particularly beneficial on a bike, but they are more expensive than steel bearings, and Tukus has clearly not tried to save money on the bearings here. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention one other nice quality of life thing about these wheels. Not that it makes that much of a difference, but they are pre-taped. So if you're going to be running these tubeless, they're pretty much ready to go out the box. Just note they don't include valves, just extenders, so you will need to have your own tubeless valves to set these up. Now it's time to throw them on the scales. Front wheel, 695.4 grams. Rear wheel, 786.4 grams. And together, 1,481.5 grams. Now clearly these wheels are not the lightest, but they are a rather deep set of wheels, and that is also pre-taped. So that probably accounts for around 20 grams of their weight. But what's really going to matter is just how well they ride out on the road. So let's get some tyres on the bike and see how they perform. I will be setting them up tubeless with my 28mm GP5000s. Well, actually, I have to say they were pretty pain-free to install tubeless. The tyres just pumped up straight away with my regular track pump. And I do like, given how deep these rims are, that they give you a valve extender in the box, because especially if you're taking spares with you, a lot of inner tubes can only really do up to a 40mm rim depth. When you're running rims this deep, it is important to make sure you've got some decent length valves with you. And to test these wheels, I am going to be putting them on my timeout Duez, replacing my Fast Sports, but I don't think they're going to fit the aesthetic very well. You'll have to let me know what you think in the comments. I think I'm going to get a bit bored waiting for this to spin down. And finally, it stopped. And the deafening free hub sound has come to an end. But yeah, them bearings, brand new of course, sound pretty smooth, don't they? Now it's time to get the wheels out on the road and see just how well they ride. It's far from gale force, but there's a decent amount of wind out today. And I'm out on these Tukus wheels for my second ever ride, and I'm doing pretty much a 5-hour endurance ride around the peaks. And I have to say, they felt pretty stable, to be honest with you. Even in the crosswinds, no more twitchiness than like a standard 40-50mm set of carbon wheels. Yeah, and considering how deep these rims are with such wide bladed spokes, yeah, I thought they were going to be absolutely awful in the crosswinds. But yeah, they've actually held up really quite well. And I've not had any sort of sketchy, twitchy moments, especially when you go past like gaps in hedges and catch a sudden gust from the side. I guess it's probably the wavy rim profile doing a good bit of work there. Anyway, I'm only about 2 hours into a 5-hour ride and I've got some big climbs to come, so I better get cracking. So as you've seen in the footage, I've been riding these Tukus wheels for around a month now actually. And I've covered many miles on them, both in training and in racing. And I have a lot of thoughts on their performance. I even rode them up Hard Knot Pass 12 times the other day. Video on that coming soon. So my opinions aren't just from spinning around the block on these wheels, they are from a proper load of testing. I'm going to go through my thoughts category by category, and the first one that I want to address is the stability. Now this is something that's actually taken me really by surprise with these wheels. I've been out on several really quite windy days, even going out along the coast and up in the fells, and not had any problems with crosswind stability. In my book, these feel generally like any other sort of 40 or 50mm deep wheels, not the 62mm deep wheels they are in the deepest place. And my concern about them spokes catching the wind, well, it's not been a problem. And even on the windiest crosswind days up the Cat and Fiddle when I've been testing them. So I think the wavy rim profile is really doing work here. And also maybe them funky design spokes are also contributing to their crosswind stability. On the flip side though, we have comfort. Now, whilst these aren't a super uncomfortable set of wheels by any imagination, they were still a little bit harsher than other wheels I've ridden, especially compared to steel-spoked wheels. Now, this is definitely nothing deal-breaking, but it's something to consider. There definitely was a noticeable firm ride feel to my bike, which, to be honest with you, is something I personally quite enjoy, especially when racing, as even if it isn't the most efficient, it definitely feels responsive. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I was testing them with 28mm GP5000 set up tubeless, so they're definitely not the widest tyre in the world, but that's all my time Alpe can take, really. I think if you were running a 30 or a 32, the comfort would be nowhere near as much as a factor. Another little issue I want to nitpick at is the non-captive spokes. I really think for a wheel set this expensive, they should have gone out and designed some hubs or picked some hubs that had a captive design. Now, maybe it was just to do with using the funky spokes that they couldn't get a hub that would work with them, but so many other manufacturers at this point are using captive hubs to the point where you don't see many of these non-captive ones anymore. And to be honest with you, these are looking like a first-gen set of wind spaces in that regard. But now we're on to a bit that I can be positive about, and that is their performance. Whilst I don't have any concrete data from a wind tunnel or done any proper aero testing, from my own personal sort of subjective opinions, they felt really good to race on and train on. In fact, I've actually set some of my fastest average speeds while on these wheels. And they weren't sluggish up the climbs either, despite their sort of near 1500 gram weight. They felt fine. But like I keep going back to, these wheels are not cheap. They are a $1,200 set of wheels, and I think some of these things that I'm sort of criticizing them on, I would let slide if it was a $600, $700, $800 set of wheels. But when you're cracking that $1,000 mark, I really expect some of these little nitpicks to be worked out. So on to the price then, and yeah, these wheels are $1,225 at the minute, which, whilst not a rip-off by any stroke of the imagination, a couple of years ago I'd be really positive about the price. But unfortunately, the carbon wheel game has got so competitive in the last couple of years, and you can get some really excellent wheels for less than even $1,000. And when you're getting up into this $1,200 to $1,500 price bracket that these wheels are trying to compete in, well, there's some extremely stiff competition. And I think if Tukus went back to the drawing board, built a version 2 of these wheels, dealt with all these issues, I think they'd be right on the money with the price. Now, I think there is one element that is going to be super polarizing with these wheels, and that is their aesthetics. Now, I imagine people will be in two camps, either absolutely love them or absolutely despise them. And yeah, they very much are a Marmite design. The bling gold decals and the sort of textured profile on the rims is quite polarizing, and I can understand why you might not be into that. But they do make other designs with other colors that are available. However, they also do have that textured finish on the rims. I think in theory, that texture is designed to be breaking up the wind and doing a bit of a golf ball dimple kind of effect. But as I said, neither Tukus nor I have any wind tunnel data to verify them claims. But if you're one for like a bling bike design and these fit, you know, your style preference, I can see why you'd be tempted to go out and buy these wheels versus, you know, some of the alternatives. If you want that fancy wavy profile with some very in-your-face colour designs, you know, look at some of Tukus's other wheels. They've got even wilder designs. So all in all, my conclusion on these wheels is they perform well, they ride pretty decently, but there are a few little things that hold them back from being an A or an S tier wheel set. And I can't really ignore these drawbacks given the price. But hopefully there'll be a version 2 of these wheels at some point that addresses some of these concerns. But don't let this take away from some of the things they do really well. There are some excellent attention to details, like properly greasing the end caps and using them ceramic bearings, along with pre-taping the rims, that Tukus has clearly gone above and beyond to make these wheels deserve their premium price tag. However, it very much seems like the number one priority when designing these wheels was nailing them aesthetics, which, love it or hate it, they have done an admirable job of. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will leave a link to these wheels in the description below if you want to check them out for yourself, if they're your sort of thing. And as I mentioned in the beginning, one of the crazy parts of my testing was when I rode these wheels up Hard Knock Pass 12 times in order to make a fairly exciting piece of content. So if you don't want to miss that, smash the subscribe button and consider joining channel membership if you want to support the channel and get early access to upcoming videos. But until the next one, I'll see you all soon.